A wildly popular website called Napster has changed the landscape for pop music fans who download music on the internet. Downloading music files isn't new, but using the web to share music files among thousands of other fans for free is not only new, it is controversial. Through Napster, digital recordings copied by web users can be copied by anyone else accessing the site, creating a copying frenzy. And it's all free to the user. That's put Napster on the catching end of lawsuits from artists and from the recording industry, which wants the website shut down. Just this week, a federal judge in California ruled against some of Napster's defense, a ruling the company plans to appeal. Among the lawsuits pending against the company is an action filed by the legendary heavy metal group Metallica. This week, the band insisted that Napster block access to more than 300,000 fans who have downloaded Metallica music through the site. The company said it would. Joining me now for a conversation on this complex issue is Lars, Ulrich, who has manned the drums for Metallica for the past 2 decades. And Chuck D, lead rapper of the group Public Enemy, who supports Napster and the free exchange of popular music on the internet. And because this is so timely and so controversial and so intense in the debate, because a lot of things are at stake here, I am pleased to have 2 people, especially these 2, here to talk about it. What is it about this? Give me in essence, the strip it away, why this is, for you, such a bad thing that you want to stop it.
In essence, it's about control. It's really about controlling what you own. You know, we clearly own our own songs. We own the master recordings to those, and we want to be the ones that control the use of those on the internet. That's it in essence. So we are going after Napster legally, in the legal form, but at the same time, which is becoming increasingly important to us, is to try and get this debate out into the public forum, to try and make people understand what's at stake here and what the ramifications are if this is not something that's dealt with and sort of guided into some sort of, with some sort of parameters that makes the artists, the service providers, and the fans out there happy.
What's at stake?
What's at stake is really the control of it.
Okay, an artist's right to own and control his own art.
Yes, that's what's at stake for us right now. At the same time, this is something that changes every 15 minutes with the advent of another technological wonder. So you can only sort of try and trail right behind where technology is going. But right now what's at stake is controlling that and trying to set some parameters for the future.
And people will say just this point. You talk about there's a new technological development, that what you guys are trying to do is stop technology, and you can't do that. And there's no way you can do that.
And we're aware of that, of course. So what we're trying to do is, as the first artist, to basically come forward and set our foot down and say, wait a minute, time out for 1 second. Let's just sit down and deal with this and try and get both a public debate going on how to control this for the future, and also, you know, in the course of the legal forum, to try and go after Napster and show to the other upstart companies out there that provide similar services that if you're going to do this, you're going to have people like Metallica with very deep pockets who are very tenacious and very emotionally involved in trying to fight this on your back all the time, and whether that's something that you want to continue pursuing, basically.
People say, just again, on your very point, they say, you've got such deep pockets. Music has been so good to you. You've made so much music that so many people love. Why worry if a few people get a few free copies?
Well, it's really not. I mean, right now it's not about the money. It's really about the control and about the future. The money that's being lost right now in this revenue is pocket change. It's really about, to me, the core issue is sort of people's perception of the internet, people's perception of what their rights are as a internet user, and in how it relates to intellectual property. You got the most extreme people sitting right now going, anything that comes through the internet, through my computer is mine to own, and I have the right to it. And that type of train of thought, I think, is very, very dangerous. It does not just affect musicians, it affects anybody who creates any type of original work. And that is something that really has to be dealt with. This thing that people take it for granted, that because it comes through the computer, through the internet, that they have a right to it. It's a very, very dangerous
You think this
decision
is
to
the
take.
first step on a very slippery slope?
Yes.
That will lead to the artist losing all control.
Yes, and
of
not
his
just
work.
musicians, all artists who create anything from scratch, absolutely.
People also say people have been recording songs off the radio for a long time. People go to your concerts and they record your songs.
And we advocate that.
I know you do.
Right.
So what's the difference?
Well, the difference is basically having a perfect first-generation digital copy of the song is basically equivalent to owning the original master CD that we sell in the stores. So we encourage people to tape our music at concerts. We have no particular issues with home taping because you're talking about clear generation losses. But when it is the original master recording of our song available in a perfect digital format, that is a different story.
Even though they're not going to sell it, even though it's just for personal use, even
Yes.
though none of that matters. In the end, it's control.
At the end of it, it's control, and it's about the people. Part of what we're trying to do here is make people understand that what they're doing is illegal. I'm not even going to get into the moral issue, that it's illegal. And if we can get one by one
Because it's
people,
theft of property in your
it's
judgment.
theft of property, absolutely.
You're an artist. You're an artist. Public Enemy, you don't want your stuff taken off.
Well, I look at Napster as just being a version of new radio. I look at, in all due respect to Lars and Metallica, they have an issue where they own their masters and they control their realm, and they want to talk about control of their realm, which is warranted and granted indeed, but they're the exception to the rule. I think the debris of artistry over the last 50 to 60 years has proven that the music business has been one in control of the artist's destiny, throwing them in, throwing them out. And right now, this war goes beyond their heads. This is like the power goes back to the people, because the industry has, over the last 15, 16 years, has been accountant and lawyer driven, and it hasn't been about the artistry. And I look at Napster as a situation, or the connection between file sharing, which this is, and downloadable distribution as power going back to the people. I also look at this as being a situation where, for the longest period of time, the industry had controlled technology, and therefore the people were subservient to that technology, and at whatever price range that the people would have to pay for it.
But where does the people's power stop?
Well,
Where does an artist have the right to say, look,
artists
I've
rarely
built a life developing my art, defining my craft, meshing talent, and producing a product. And now you want to say to me, everybody can have that product? Everybody that can download off of the internet has a right to my product without compensating me?
You brought up the point yourself that even in 1967, when FM radio came about, and there was this big outcry that the quality of the radio is actually going to take aboard the artist's music and take away from their sales point. When cassette recorders came in, it was this, they're going to rob, they're going to take away from the sales. And this has proven to be contrary to what has happened. Matter of fact, it's a super turbo booster to the industry. What is going to take place now is that, the computers have allowed the internet to actually expose music throughout the world, a greater exposure point, and for an industry that has prided itself off the enthusiasm of the fans, it's really funny hearing them trying to put their hands up and saying, well, this is the biggest thing since the Beatles, but we have to stop it until it gets regulated. And the industry for long has driven out contracts which claim worldwide rights, which they have never been able to fulfill.
But if I understand your argument,
right,
and you've written about this eloquently, it is that this is the internet, and downloading music is the only way some artists have a chance of reaching an audience.
Right. Well,
it's not going to happen.
I foresee in 2 years there'll be 1 million artists and there'll be 1 million startup labels, and for the longest time, the labels' dominance have kept the little man from participating in the music business. They're screaming and crying because they'll have to share the marketplace. I don't have a problem with that. I looked at the major labels and their dominance, being lawyer and accountant driven, counting what's not there, and then coming up and concocting a situation like this will hurt the music industry when there's actually no proof. I'm pretty sure Mr. Lars would agree that the 336 people that he named, they're pretty much 350,000 people are Metallica fans.
Yeah, well, of course, the other argument is that they could come back with some other name.
And I also would also
it goes out one fire at a time. I mean, that's clear. I mean, just because for every counter argument that somebody has, well, do you realize, you know, that somebody else, it's like you can only deal with it one step at a time. I mean, that it's sort of like you're just going to sit there and say, well, there's always somebody who can, you know, build another nuclear warhead. So does that mean that you shouldn't go and destroy the ones that exist already? So you take it one step at a time. The odds are obviously against us, but we believe that for us, it's the right thing to do. And I agree with a lot of the things that you're saying.
But where do you disagree with him? I mean,
well,
in other words, are you guys talking past each other? You agree with young artists ought to have an opportunity to find an audience, or do you?
Well, what I agree with is that I think that for artists that want to use Napster as a vehicle to get out there, I have no problem with that. In the same way that I don't want people to have a problem with me not wanting to use Napster.
Okay, so
as
here's
a
our
vehicle.
solution.
Right.
Here's our solution. If you don't want it to be downloaded, then don't download it. If you're a young artist who needs an audience, download it. What's wrong with that?
I mean, the problem...
Is that your argument?
Well, yeah, I mean, my analogy is the Book of the Month Club situation, where every month you get a book in your mailbox, and if you don't send it back, if you don't go to the trouble of sending it back, you have to pay for it. So what Napster could have done is they could have gone to all the artists, and they could have said, we are starting the service, we're providing the service, would you like to partake in it? And give everybody a chance to say, yes, thank you, or no, thank you. It's clearly not
happening. Technology will
happening.
beat technology each and every time. And I would counter the fact that exposure to a product will still drive that fan base to go pick up that product and still contribute to the bottom line of an artist or a business anyway. And the whole paradigm of the music business is changing because there was another parallel music world to the one has been dominated by the former rules, and the former rules are out of the door like an old baseball game. The new rules of music sharing, music distribution, music exposure are now globalized, and I take to it like, okay, you're in the outfield, it's raining, but the ump says play ball anyway. You know that to go catch a fly ball, you have to run different on the wet grass. So you're not going to be able to beat the technology. It's almost like dropping a whole bunch of M&Ms on the ground when you had control of them, and now everybody's going to bend down and pick it up, and you can't say stop. You know.
Let me ask you, you're in the movie business too, right?
I do scoring. I'm not in the movie.
Well, okay, but I mean, you do scoring for movies.
Right.
Suppose you make a movie, and we get the capacity to download movies, and you finance the damn movie, you know, and you hire the actors, and you score it, and you go out, and you bring musicians in, and I'm sitting there at my internet site, and somebody creates software so I can download your movie, and I'm not going to the theater to see your movie, and I'm not going to buy a cassette, and I'm not going to buy a DVD. I'm going to take my little equipment and download that sucker.
I better understand that I better not spend a lot of money making that movie, number one.
Well, you don't have a problem with that, because you're saying to me, that's the new world.
I can't have the accountant's mentality of counting what wasn't there in the first place. Accountant mentality is like, oh, you could have had, well, and now the terrain is totally different.
So what are you saying to all artists that create products that can be downloaded, either now or later, because it's all coming to
all
fore.
digital.
You're saying anything that can be digitized, if you're an artist, look, it's going to be shared, and it's going to be a certain amount of people who have an interest in the technology are going to get theirs free. Wake up and smell the coffee.
Right. That's the technology that's come into place, and the only thing.
And you're saying to Lars, forget it. It's a losing battle.
I talked to Dr. Dre, what did
Dr. Dre say?
Dr. Dre was basically clueless. He just like, hey, so his lawyer, and Lars is probably more connected to the lawyer, and and Dre's a good friend.
Yeah.
And if the lawyer said, Dre, they're taking money out of your pocket, then Dre say, hey, yeah, stop them. But the issue at hand is bigger than all this. And so
I just wish that I could sit here and tell you, Charlie, that it was about the money. It's clear we have, and respect that we have different opinions on this, but I just believe
the control.
Yeah, and what you were saying about, of course, there will be, in a year or 5 years or whatever, there will be softwares you can download movies.
Right.
I mean, this goes everywhere. This goes literature, poetry, the whole 9 yards. It really is about this whole perception about if it's intellectual, do I have a right to it for free because technology allows me to
If it can be downloaded, it can be free, is what somebody's going to say.
It's going to throw commerce and the whole perception of all this stuff completely on its head. And does it mean that the only things that you can't apply this to are people working in assembly lines?
But
I
Lars,
mean, it's just,
I think it's beneficial to trigger off the enthusiasm of what's taking place. You got budding Metallica fans that, you know, and that will increase, but there's so many ancillary areas that you guys control that you won't be able to download that they got to come to you for. And we have to look at, you know, the sound as dominant as it was in the last 50 years of industry controlling the hardware, making you, you know, also have the software that you have to comply to both. That whole paradigm has changed. So now it has to be other ancillary areas. Now many artists will have the opportunity to actually interact with the global aspect of the world. And they couldn't do that before, and the companies couldn't do that. Now, of course, if we talk about control, you know, that's a microcosm of what the big boys are going to actually say themselves, like, we have control, Charlie, and we have the control to bring you into that.
Quick, which is, I think that most of what you're saying deals with the record company being these money hungry, you know, greedy, blah, blah, blah. Remember one thing. I can guarantee you that there's nobody at Napster that is doing this as a charitable event for all of mankind, okay? There are investors behind Napster, and there are people that are sitting counting the days till Napster has an IPO offering, and they all make millions of dollars in return for their work.
But there's always been the shadow of technology lurking over entertainment anyway.
Right.
And it's definitely been two different worlds.
But there's millions of dollars involved in this in the same way that there's millions of dollars in the evil of music business, as you're saying. And I just think that it's like, if the record company bosses don't take the money, then the internet people are going to somebody's going to profit off this. And if it's not the artist, then you're profiting illegal. It's bulletproof. I mean,
all right, it's bulletproof, meaning what? Meaning that the argument.
I mean, who can argue with that?
All right, here's my point too. Do you know, when you say it's not about the money,
it's not about the money now.
When you say it's not about the money, somebody says it's about the money. You know, it's always true. When somebody says it's not about the money, somebody says it's about the money.
That can also be my counter argument. Yeah. People sit there and go, it's about greed for Metallica, but it's also a reversible greed because you're just as greedy because you don't want to pay $16 for a CD. That's the marketplace.
Well, good point. Let me finish this point though. The other point is that you think this principle is so important that if there's some fans out there that are going to be alienated because you're out front leading the fight, you're saying goodbye.
Bye-bye.
We got enough fans.
If you don't have enough,
we can spare a few.
No, it's not even that, Charlie. It's if you don't have enough respect for the fact that I believe this way and that I have a right to challenge it and try and write it for what's right for me, I don't want you as a fan.
Well, I think there's artists, whether they're in Oslo or whether they're in the middle of the United States, who can't get signed or probably couldn't get signed because of the limitations of the music business. This actually expands that whole paradigm, and I just think that they will thrive off the new system as opposed to trying to beg on the old system.
But I'm not saying that they can't thrive on it. I'm saying that there's got to be a way to make people who want to retain the control of their copyrighted material happy, and in the same way make Napster available to the people who want to use it.
There's a couple of ways that's being developed right now. Absolutely. I'm working with people in Silicon Valley on a way to work with MP3s to make it free for the public and then retraceable back to the artist having control and money. But the thing about it, the company actually being, you know,
then wait a minute. It's free to the public and it's traceable back to the artist, so they have control.
Makes revenue for the artist and whatever team.
Who pays the revenue to the artist? Then I don't get this.
Well, this company exists out there and they're working on it now, and
right, but you cannot look me in the eye and tell me that they're not doing it for some kind of profit.
But they're doing it because they could be technical nerds that just love to see change every second. You got cats out there. The kid that got involved with Napster, you think he had...
You know what? I respect you, man. I respect you, but you know, in the United States, nobody does anything for free.
Lars, you got people out there that will buy your album even if after they download it. Why do you think Blockbuster's a big industry when people could tape off of HBO, Cinemax, and Showtime? They still will go get it.
I've talked to people who are sitting there going, I downloaded one of your songs from Napster. I went out and bought the record. wonderful, God bless you, but does that mean that I can't still go after Napster? I mean,
Oh, no,
I
no,
think it's
nobody said you
wonderful.
can't.
But I just think it's ignorant to sit there and say that just because you take it away from the record business and the record companies and you hand it over to all these other people that make it available in a different way, that there's not going to be the same profiteering from that. That
Same
is
thing
ignorant.
with I mean, you're not crying about the radio industry making their money. The radio industry actually.
But I'm not crying about the music business making money on it because they invested in the. Fred Durst sits there and says, you know, I believe that Napster is a great company, and we want to go against what the record companies do. Who paid for your Nookie video? Who spent $600,000 so you could have a video on MTV that made you sell $8 million? You didn't pay for it yourself.
If Fred Durst
somebody else
died
paid
tomorrow,
for it.
it'd be somebody else there. So I'm not saying the record companies are bad guys. They're just doing for whatever. Right. There's a debris of artistry in the artist's graveyard to actually feel sorry for those cats.
All right. Let me conclude with this. Give me a solution to this.
I'm not sure that I have one right now in a soundbite. I think ultimately by the time we get around to making our next original album, that we will have looked at the possibilities and potential solutions enough to start on the next new album cycle with making the new record or portions of the new record available in some format to people on our conditions and our terms. We're looking at that right now. If all this wasn't taking up so much of our time and energy right now, we could concentrate on that, and we will be. It's all about balance. We'll get there.
So let me just say right now, I'm thankful you came here so we can at least get this conversation going. Last word, you got a solution to this other than full steam ahead for free access?
Well, it's a parallel world and a new paradigm taking place. We have to adapt to it. And, like I said, this talk goes beyond Chuck and Lars. Absolutely. This is industry versus the people, and the people, have got it on their side, and we have to adapt.
Do you think that when you say industry versus the people, you have to put in a third component? You have to talk about the service providers. They are an equal component in this game. It's not just the musicians and the fans and the record companies. The potential service providers knocking on the doors with all their new technology are as big a part of this game.
And the record companies would love to control them. Just like they would love to control radio and TV, but...
Are you more of an entrepreneur or an artist?
I'm part Jamaican. I got 9 jobs, so I could be anything at any given day. But I do tell you that I thrive off the enthusiasm of the people. I think the power goes to the people, bottom line. I have a global point of view at things, and I don't have that typical American entrepreneur spirit that would probably, land me in a nest egg. So I've always been that way.
Thank you. Thank you, Chuck D. Thank you, Lars. Pleasure.
Thank you,
on the program.
Lars.
Thank you both. We may be able to solve this thing here if we get the Napster people in. We'll be right back. Stay with us.